This is the 12th video in a series that is designed to help you give useful information to Jehovah's Witnesses so that they can make an informed decision about their religious beliefs. In each video I give you background information and then suggest what to say and what questions to ask. This is intended to do for the Jehovah's Witnesses what you would want done for you if you were a Jehovah's Witness. In this series you will be studying with the Jehovah's Witnesses in their favorite publication, this book, What Does the Bible Really Teach? You will read the paragraphs and answer the questions that are at the bottom of the page. You do not need to agree with the material that you hear, but you should give an answer that question in your own words, and you're essentially just giving back what the book is saying. Now, if the Jehovah's Witnesses say something or teach something that you don't agree with, and it's not something I discuss in these videos, that's because it's a subject that's really not contrary to the evangelical community, and I'm not going to discuss it. It's accepted. So you should acknowledge to the Jehovah's Witness that this subject, which is not covered in any of these videos, is accepted, tolerated within the evangelical community. The issue that I'm discussing in this particular video is on page 75. It's in the chapter, Real Hope for Your Loved Ones Who Have Died. And on page 75, it's about this picture. And I'm going to show you the picture right there. Okay? And you can see what a happy thing it is. And maybe you can read the caption that's there. It says, "In paradise the dead will rise and be reunited with their loved ones." And again, in the picture you'll see some very happy families. In fact, two cases where you have parents, or appear to be parents, welcoming their children. Apparently the children have been raised, or maybe the parents have been raised and the children just, I don't know, where do the children come from? But it's likely that the children have been raised, and it appears that those children are raised in their own family. What the Jehovah's Witnesses are not telling you here, they don't tell you anywhere in the book, is that this only applies to those who live on earth. It does not apply to those who go to heaven. Remember from last time, and from reading this book, you know the Jehovah's Witnesses believe in two classes. There's a class that will go to heaven. There's only 144,000. They're all adults. They go to heaven and they stay there for eternity. And there's only 144,000 of them. The rest of mankind that is worthy of the kingdom live on earth in a second class. And that's, of course, a very large number of people. And according to Jehovah's Witnesses, that's almost everyone who's ever lived will live on earth. Only certain ones that God has specifically condemned because they knew the message of God and rejected it. Those are the only ones who don't make it into the kingdom. But just about everyone else does, all the people who have ever lived. So the question comes up, well, what about those who died, faithful Christians who were part of that 144,000, say first century Christians? Mary, the mother of Jesus, maybe she had little ones that died as minors, as little children. We don't know if she had little children that died. The Bible doesn't say. Those little children would get to come back in the kingdom, but Mary is going to be in heaven and the children won't. So where are those children going to be, and who's going to raise those children? Who's going to hold those children? Who's going to tuck them in bed at night? Not Mary. That's the question is, does this picture, that's the question you're going to ask, does this picture apply to those who go to heaven? And the answer is no. And there's a doctrine that isn't well discussed amongst Jehovah's Witnesses, but that the children of those who are in heaven will be adopted out on earth, and someone else will tuck them in at night. I'm going to contrast that with a different doctrine, another doctrine. This is accepted within the evangelical community. This is from a book. This is the 1990 publication of Eternal Security by Charles Stanley. There's a picture of him. You don't have to agree with Charles Stanley. You don't have to agree with his book on eternal security. And you don't have to agree with this subject on chapter 12, which is about living on earth forever in a beautiful place. Charles Stanley teaches, and I'm about to read it. It says, "Our final home. Most Christians believe their ultimate destiny is heaven. That is not true. Man's ultimate destiny is planet Earth. Charles Stanley believes that Christians, when they die, they go to heaven, but later on they come down to earth and live on earth in this beautiful place forever. Now, Charles Stanley, if you don't know who he has a religious program on radio and TV. He was a former president of the Southern Baptist Convention, largest Protestant denomination on earth, and he's quite well known. And this is some more of what he says in his book. God placed man here for a specific purpose, to rule over creation. The earth became man's responsibility. To make his job easier, God designed a body for man that is tailor-made for living and working on planet Earth. That was God's plan in the beginning. Then he has a section here, our temporary home, and he says Christians go to heaven when they die. He says when Christians die, they go to heaven immediately. Next page, page 110, he says, but Christians do not stay in heaven forever. When Christ returns, he will establish a kingdom on this earth, a kingdom that will last for 1,000 years. Okay, and he says that it makes sense that we will be included in this kingdom. Keep in mind this is an earthly kingdom, so once again, believers will make their home on earth. He talks about the Jerusalem coming down out of heaven, so those who are in heaven come down, and that's Revelation chapter 21, 1 through 3. So Charles Stanley takes it the meaning that those who are in heaven will come down to earth and stay there. It says, instead of men dying and going to heaven, John presents us with a picture of God packing up and coming to earth. The point is, after Christ returns, man is back on earth forever. All right, he says, next section, think again. It says, that is not all that matters, because heaven is just a stopover. Heaven is temporary. We are all coming back one way or another. Okay, so that's this evangelical doctrine. Now the question is, as I said, you don't have to agree with that, but the question that's going to be posed to the Jehovah's Witnesses is that their view? The answer is no. They believe, again, there's two classes that stay separated for eternity, while, as you read, Charles Stanley says everybody, one way or another, that's reckoned to be in the kingdom will come back and live on earth, and so families will truly be reunited. Okay, we're going to use that. So this is how you might present this to the Jehovah's Witnesses. All right, when you meet with them and you're going through that paragraph, paragraph 25, which says what will be considered in the next chapter, and you're looking at this picture, and so you say, say I had another question. I was looking over this, and it says, in paradise the dead will rise and be reunited with their loved ones. And then I see a couple families here with children being reunited with parents. And the one over here, it's a whole family, a father and a mother and children. And made me think that this is very similar to a doctrine that's very pervasive in mainstream evangelical community. I've known people to teach this, like David Jeremiah, who has a radio and a TV show, and Charles Stanley, who has a radio and TV show. In fact, Charles Stanley is quite, I don't know if you've heard of him, he's quite prominent. In fact, he was the president a couple times of the Southern Baptist Convention, which is the largest Protestant denomination. And I'm curious if what you believe is the same as what Charles Stanley and David Jeremiah teach, or if there's some differences. And I thought about it, and I was looking through your book, and I think there is a difference. But I have to guess. I'm going to let you, explain that to me. But according to this view that I'm talking about, that I have a book here in my house somewhere by Charles Stanley, and I can get it if we need to. But it says that families will be reunited and live on earth forever. All those that are reckoned worthy of the kingdom will be back on earth forever. And this picture kind of made me remember that and think of that, and I was wondering if that's what you believe. And let the witness talk. And if they don't pick up on what you're wondering about people in heaven, and say, then you ask, so does this apply to people who went to heaven, that the people in heaven will come back to earth, like Charles Stanley says? Let the witness answer that, and they'll say, oh no, that's not what we mean. So then you say, well, what about the little children in this picture, these little children, they're reunited with their parents. What about those who were faithful Christians that had little children that may have died as little ones? They had children that died. Maybe they died as a part of Roman persecution, or maybe they just died of other causes. I get the idea in the picture that they will see their children again, but so will these children of, let's say Mary had some little children that died when they were little. Will Mary, the mother of Jesus, get to raise those children in heaven again? And you let them answer, and the answer is, well, no. And then as you respond, go, you know, that sounds like a real sad doctrine. Of all your doctrines I've heard so far, this is one of the saddest, that these folks who go to heaven will not ever be united with their children again for eternity. What will happen to their children? Let the witness answer that these children will be adopted out. And again, if the witness says something other than this answer, say, you know, in this book it doesn't actually say what will happen to the children of these of heavenly dwellers. Do you have a publication from your church that explains what will happen to the children of these heavenly folks that may have died when they were little and their folks went to heaven? Because it doesn't say here. I hear what you're saying, but could you show me what will happen to those children, whether they will go to heaven or not? And you wait for the witness to research it, come back, and tell you or show you that their publications teach officially that the children will be adopted out to other families on earth. And then you reinforce your comment that, my, this is such a sad doctrine. This is a doctrine that's the saddest one you've heard so far in the book. While in comparison with what others teach, such as Charles Stanley, that doctrine is such a happy doctrine, that the children will be reunited with their parents, regardless whether it's Mary who went to heaven or some. Say, Mary, her husband was Joseph. Do you believe that Mary and Joseph will be in heaven together, or will Joseph, what will happen to them? And let the witness answer that Mary will be in heaven and Joseph will be living on earth forever. They'll be eternally separated. And then you look at this picture and say, but this has families united, husband and wife and children. So that's not true for Mary, Joseph, and their little children? My, that is a sad doctrine. How do you cope with that? That is quite disturbing. I'd be curious to hear how you make a distinction, why you feel so strongly that your belief is the way it is, and it's not what Charles Stanley teaches, that families would be united forever on earth. And a verse comes to mind. Let's see, Matthew 19, verses 13 and 14. Could you read that? Now, you'll have Matthew 19, 13 and 14 written in the margin here. And I'm going to read it out of my translation here. It says, "Then some children were brought to him, Jesus, so that he might lay his hands on them and pray, and the disciples rebuked them. But Jesus said, 'Let the children alone, and do not hinder them from coming to me, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these.'" Now, wouldn't that be odd that Jesus would say that the kingdom of heaven belongs to the children, and yet no children are there? And if Mary had any children that died when they were young, they won't be there, and the families are going to be split up for eternity? That sounds really odd to me. Did you say that? It sounds really odd. And say, help me out. Could you explain that verse and show me why it can't mean what this other view says that's accepted within mainstream evangelical Christianity? And let the witness explain. And have a pad of paper out and take notes. And if the witness does not give you a satisfying answer, make a note of that and say, you know, your question was, what happens to the little children that belong to folks in heaven, and will the families be reunited? And if you don't get a satisfactory answer, make a note of that, because later on we're going to use that at the end when you finish the book. And I'll say that the other videos that I do here, and I ask ask questions that you should pass on, and verses and so forth. When you don't get an answer, make a note of it. Or if you do get an answer, what that answer is. Make a note of it. So that when the study is all done, when we get to the end of the book, you'll be able to say, yes, I got answers here, but sometimes I didn't get an answer. And I need some help on that. All right? But don't argue with them. Just acknowledge what they say and then write it down and move on.